So go back to your filbert brush, one more coat of flesh tone. And for this third coat, if you need to put a little bit of water into the color, you can. I'm going to start some of the detail next on my wings, and I'm going to use the black silver rake brush to do that. Now the black silver rakes actually come in several different sizes. This is actually a 1/4, but what I've done is I've taken and snipped a little bit off of each side with a little scissors and made it even smaller so that I can get a little bit more detail done. I'm going to start with some dark gray and thin it with water, the same consistency that you would use for doing your liner brush work, so like half paint, half water. Make a nice little puddle that you can keep going back and dipping into, and you'll reload the brush often. And I'm going to zoom in, get a little bit closer here. And we're going to do some details on the feathers. Okay, so now on each feather there's like this center vein line, and I'm going to pull from the center vein line, and a little bit more paint on there yet, using the little tips and pulling little feathery lines on each side of the center vein. And you'll notice that I'm kind of pulling at an angle, so maybe like a 45-degree angle down from the center vein, and I want to do that on each of the feathers. So I start with that bottom row, and I can either pull towards the center vein or from the center vein and down. It just depends on the angle that you're holding your project. Just nice little feathery lines. So much faster than using a liner brush. Reload often. And don't forget to get down at the bottom tips. If you're not getting little lines, then you may not have enough water in your brush. Also, you do want to slow it down a little bit. I always have a tendency to want to go really quick. When you're working on a canvas, you want the paint to have time to soak down into those little crevices, so you might have to slow down your brush strokes just a little bit. Give it time to come off the brush so that it gets down into those little crevices easier. Okay, and then I've got my next layer of feathers. And it's gonna, you're not going to be able to really see distinction between the middle layer of feathers and the bottom until after we get our next step. So they're still kind of blending into each other a little bit at this stage. Now sometimes if it's a smaller angel, I might only pull feathers on one side of the center vein and make it just look like they're kind of overlapping a little more. Okay, and then for the top area, just kind of like, and the little fluff, just kind of like little half circles. I'm going to want it a little darker up in the corner. You don't need a whole lot of detail in there at this stage, so just a little bit fluffed in there. And then the other side, there again, you only see a couple of actual feathers. The rest of it just kind of gets fudged in with little strokes. Like down here, just kind of add some extra little lines. But I can maybe see 2 feathers, and then the rest is kind of fudged in. Little half circles in the fluff. Okay, and then I'll come back and I'm going to start doing some titanium white next. So I'll just use the same brush, thin it with water, half and half. And I want there to be a little bit thicker right on the tips. So to me, it's easier to turn the piece upside down to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this around. Okay, so I've got the white, and I want the tips. I pull from the tips towards the center vein, but I don't necessarily need to go all the way to the center vein. Now, sometimes I might, but I don't want to lose all that gray. Okay. Also, maybe it's easier for you, if you're not used to this, to actually go ahead and start with that center row, because then you're going to be able to see the tips, and that's going to help divide the center row from the bottom feathers. So pulling from the outside edges this time towards the center vein, and I'll come back with the liner brush and get that center vein in after. But if you need that for a guideline, you could do that first. It's just going to do white, titanium white. If I get too carried away with this white color, I can always come back with my gray or my medium white. I'm not trying to totally cover up any of the colors that I've already got in here. I want to be able to see all 3 colors, a little bit of all 3. So nice fuzzy edges, feathery edges. Light touch. Try not to push down, because if you push down, you'll just end up filling in. You won't get the nice little lines. And you'll just kind of, you know, some of the areas you just got to kind of fudge it in a little bit. Okay, and I'll probably come back and get some brighter white again. So this is just one layer of the white for now. And let me go ahead and use like a 20-aught mini script. This is also in the black gold. Love this little liner brush, and I'll use this to put the little center veins in, titanium white. Thin it with a little bit of water so you can get a skinny line. Add your center veins. Like I said, you could have done this first if that helps you keep track of where the feathers are. Okay, and then I want to get a little brighter white on the bottom edge of the fluff area. So just kind of like little circles, little half circles, just nice and delicate. Try not to fill it in too much. You want it brighter on that edge where it overlaps, but then kind of fade so you really don't see much of it in that top corner of the wing. Let it just kind of fade away. Okay, and I do need to let this dry before I can come back and put any more white in there. Otherwise it'll just keep soaking in and soaking in. I'm also going to come back and do a little bit of shadow underneath that center wing area so that I can see a little bit better distinction between the two of them. Okay, then also you want to get on the other side. So on this one, let's go ahead and put the center vein in first because you've only got 2 feathers over there that you can really see. So I'm just going to pick 2 spots. And that's where the center vein is going to be. Okay, and then my rake brush. Okay, now, and if I'm going to pull not from the edge towards the center because I'm at an awkward angle here, I have to be very light-handed when I first set that brush down because I don't want a great big glob of paint in the middle of the feather. I want there to be more paint on the tips of the feathers, not in the middle of them. So you got to have a little bit more delicate touch. But otherwise I can't reach it. And then just a little bit of little feathery lines in the bottom there too, just to fudge it in. Okay, and then in that top little fluff area, little half circles. Try not to cover up all the gray because then it looks flat. I'm going to start working on the top part of the wing next, and I'll go ahead and switch to my little bit bigger rake brush. I'll use the regular 1/4 inch rake for that, and I'm going to start by doing some medium white. So add some water to your medium white, half and half. And just always kind of check the tips, make sure you don't have big globs on there. Okay, so for the top of the wing, I want to get the handle so that it's kind of like straight up in the air towards the ceiling so that I'm pulling on the little tips. Work a little bit slow. Okay, now I don't have quite enough water in there because it's not giving me a nice line. So a little bit more water. Try this again. There. That's better. Okay, reload often. So on the edge, the top edge of the wing, I'm kind of going sideways and then I'm pulling in, and I want it to come down into the top edge of the fluff. And I'm going to follow that curve. I don't want it solid at this point. Still want to be able to see little bits of the black. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And on this side, I'm kind of curving towards the angel to start with. Kind of overlapping down into the rest of the wing. But then as I come out and away, I'm going to start changing the direction of the stroke so that it's a little bit more of an S shape. So here, I'll put one off to the side a little bit more. A little more of an S shape as I work my way to the outside edge. And then you want to kind of somewhere in between get those two directions to kind of melt together. But I do want the top edge to be just slightly more solid but nice and feathery tips. And just try to avoid filling it in solid. Get a little bit more on the outside edges over here too. Light touch. Try not to push down. Okay, then I want to get a little bit of color going in with some more shadow. And I'm going to put medium gray and just a little touch of that dioxazine purple in there. Now I'm just going to use water and a 1/2 inch angle brush. There again, this is a black gold 1/2 inch angle brush, and I'm just going to use water in my brush, but if you need a little more time blending, you can certainly put the extender in the brush instead of the water. I want to use medium gray and just the teeniest little tiny dot of dioxazine purple in there. Just a touch of the purple. Okay, kind of mix that together, and then I'll clean my brush because I only want to get some of this on the corner. So the corner or the tip that has the color on it, I'm pointing towards that middle row of feathers and just kind of chopping in underneath to help separate the two rows from each other. So I'm using the chisel edge of the angle brush. Just kind of chop that in there. And I'm going to do the same up under between the fluff and the center row. A little bit more of the kind of a circle, half circle kind of motion. And I'm going to get some up in that top corners of the top of the wing. A little bit of medium gray, a little touch of dioxazine purple. I like to actually just mix as I go. I just kind of brush mix, but you could certainly mix a complete puddle. Just kind of chop it in. It's not like a real nice corner load. Just kind of chop that in there. A little bit of color up in both corners. Let's get up in the other side as well. You can just pull it down with the chisel edge of the brush. And I'll also get some to separate the fluff and that couple feathers there. Okay. Okay, then I'm going to see if it's dry enough to be able to go back and do some more white. And I have a choice. I can either use my rake brush at this stage, or I could switch to my liner brush. You want to be able to see the white now, so you kind of check it out, see which one shows up better. And let's turn it upside down so we can see that left wing a little better. Let's try it first with just the rake. And I'm using my 1/8 inch rake, the one that I trimmed. Thin the paint. Okay. Okay, now this time I'm going to try and stay more just towards the bottom half of the feather. I don't want to go all the way up to where I touch the next row. So just really catching the bottom tips. Okay, and then also the bottom tips of the next row, but don't go all the way up to the fluff. And if this isn't showing up enough for you, stop and switch to a liner brush, because you'll get a little bit different texture. Very light touch. And then I'm also going to do the very tips of the top area as well. And I'm going to keep it upside down because I want to pull from the tips up this time instead of from the top edge down, because I just want the tips to be a brighter white. There again, half paint, half water. And you can always at any time go back a step and, you know, do any of the other colors if you get too carried away. Just a nice light touch. Try to make each of the strokes slightly different. Don't want it so uniform that it looks like it's been stenciled on. And just do as much of it as you can, and then, you know, wait till you have more of the piece done rather than getting too carried away at this stage. Even though the feathers are white, if you get too much white, they're just going to look flat. You'll lose the dimension. And I think I do want just a few little accents with the liner brush on a few of the tips. So still using titanium white thinned with water. Just kind of break it up a little bit. You actually get a little bit thicker line. But I kind of like that. It'll help make it look not quite so uniform. Just a few little touches. And if it does get too solid looking, go back and, you know, get some more shadow lines pulling from the main line. That just helps to accent those tips one more time. Okay. And I'll wait to see if I want any more on the flip of the wing after I've completed more of the piece. Maybe just a few more white little fluffs just on that bottom edge. Brighten that one more time. Okay, then on the other side, try and get a little brighter tips. There again, you only got 2 feathers basically that you can see. And a little bit on the bottom edge of the fluff. And then the bottom tips of the longer strokes that come from the top edge. But there again, I'm going to turn it upside down so it's easier to pull towards yourself. Okay, now I got a little bit too much of a solid, I pushed too much pressure down and I got too much of a solid stroke there, so that's a good thing. I'll show you how I fix that after. I'll just get the rest of them first. I usually do that when I'm trying to get in too much of a hurry, and then I end up putting my brush down too hard. Well, and it kind of blended in pretty nice. So I'm gonna, but let me just show you anyway. I'm gonna take some of the dark gray and thin that with water, and I'll just pull a few little delicate lines of that, and that helps break up any of the areas that you might have gotten too solid. So just kind of play with it a little bit. Couple brighter, whiter tips, and then I'm going to leave this alone. I'll get the fur started on the muff and the collar. And I'm going to start out with medium white. And it doesn't matter which one I start with. I think I'll start with the collar. Okay, let's start up close to the neck there. Thin the medium white, half paint, half water, and I'm going to use the 1/4 inch rake. And I'm just going to pull like a little circular, it kind of curves off to each side, and then somewhere in the middle just straightens a little bit. Try not to make it solid. Okay, and then I've got a long section and then a short roll. I'm going to start with the bottom edge actually. There again, try and curve it. Up on the tip. Try not to put pressure down. You want those little fuzzy edges at the bottom. Same on the other side. Reload often. Okay, then I'm going to come down from the top close to the hair. Still using the medium white. And they curve to the outside. So somewhere in the middle it kind of switches. Okay, and I can go ahead and do the fur up on the hat. I'm not going to pull it as long as what you can see in the photograph. I'm going to stop a little short. It's going to be the brighter white that's going to overlap onto her hair. So I can get the initial kind of basing in done. There again, just medium white, use the rake brush, kind of curve it. You're going to come down the side. This is just kind of it's kind of like your base coating with little lines. And come down the opposite side. So for this stage, I kind of stay inside of my graphite lines, but when I go to do the other stage with the brighter white, I'll actually go outside of the lines a little bit. Okay, and then I believe the fur on the muff, same color, and this is a great big rounded muff. Now you want to make sure that you're kind of use the right edge as your guideline, but you're not going to make necessarily one continuous stroke. You can do it in shorter strokes, but all coming down. And it all curves off to the right on this. I want to make sure I curl that under and kind of curl around where her arm is going to be. There again, try not to get it filled in too solid. Follow the roundness of the cuff. Right around where that arm is.